I'm Emily Costa, and as always, I'm here to help you make sense of the forces moving the raw materials that power our world. We have a lot to unpack today, and the big theme tying it all together is strain. Strain on supply chains, strain on energy systems, and strain on the geopolitical order that underpins trade. Let's start with a market that has quietly and then very loudly become the emotional barometer of global anxiety: gold. Prices have surged past $5,000 per ounce, an extraordinary milestone that reflects not just investor nerves, but a deep structural shift in who is buying and why. Analysts are now openly discussing scenarios where gold moves towards $6,000 per ounce this year, driven by persistent geopolitical tension and aggressive buying from central banks, particularly in emerging markets. What makes this rally different from past spikes is the breadth of demand. Central banks are steadily adding to reserves, seeking diversification away from the US dollar. At the same time, exchange-traded funds backed by physical bullion are seeing renewed inflows as investors anticipate lower interest rates, which reduce the opportunity cost of holding a metal that pays no yield. Retail investors are also in the mix, especially in Asia and parts of Europe, where small bars and coins are flying off the shelves despite high prices. It is a classic safe haven story, but on a much larger and more institutional scale than we have seen in years. Now, while investors are hoarding gold for safety, parts of the energy system are dealing with very real physical stress. In the eastern United States, a blast of frigid winter weather has exposed just how tight power and gas markets can become. Power plant outages have jumped sharply, with tens of gigawatts of generation knocked offline in key regions. Grid operators have been forced to issue emergency alerts and ask large customers to curb electricity use to keep the system stable. The core problem is natural gas. During prolonged cold snaps, pipeline capacity into major demand centres becomes constrained. Power plants that normally rely on gas either cannot get enough fuel or face sky-high prices. That pushes grids to lean more heavily on oil-fired generation, especially in New England, where fuel diversity is limited. The result has been eye-watering wholesale power prices, in some cases several $100s per megawatt hour, and a renewed debate about whether the system has enough firm on-demand capacity as older plants retire and demand from data centers continues to surge. From energy infrastructure stress, let's shift to energy trade flows, because sanctions and conflict are reshaping those in a big way. Russian fuel oil exports to Asia have slowed sharply at the start of this year. Volumes are running far below levels seen a year ago, with tighter Western sanctions and increased scrutiny making buyers more cautious. On top of that, Ukrainian drone attacks on Russian refineries have disrupted output, reducing the amount of product available for export in the first place. This matters because high-sulfur fuel oil is not just a shipping fuel. It is also a key feedstock for complex refineries in Asia. With Russian barrels moving more slowly and Venezuelan supplies to China also under pressure, the regional balance is tightening. Some Russian cargoes are taking longer, more expensive routes, including voyages around Africa, and others are sitting in storage hubs waiting for buyers willing to navigate the sanctions risk. All of this adds friction, and friction in commodity markets usually means higher volatility and firmer prices. Staying with geopolitics, there is another oil story worth watching closely, and it centers on Mexico and Cuba. Mexico is reportedly reviewing whether to continue oil shipments to Cuba, which have become even more important after Venezuelan supplies were disrupted. But the concern in Mexico is that maintaining these flows could provoke retaliation from the United States at a sensitive moment in trade and security relations. For Cuba, the stakes are enormous. The island relies heavily on imported fuel to keep the lights on and transportation moving. Any reduction in Mexican shipments could deepen energy shortages and increase the risk of humanitarian strain. For oil markets, the volumes are not huge in global terms, but the episode highlights how energy trade is increasingly entangled with diplomatic pressure, sanctions, and broader strategic competition. Let's turn to agriculture, where abundance in one part of the world is creating headaches in another. Argentina is coming off a bumper wheat harvest, and that surge in supply is intensifying competition in export markets that European producers depend on. Countries like Morocco, traditionally important buyers of European Union wheat, are now seeing attractive offers from Argentina and the Black Sea region. European farmers are reluctant to sell at current low price levels, which complicates the export picture further. Analysts are trimming forecasts for European Union wheat exports this season, warning that unless prices fall enough to regain competitiveness, a larger share of the surplus could remain at home. It is a classic global grain story. When one major producer has a big crop, the pressure radiates outward through prices, trade flows, and farm incomes across continents. Coffee markets are also navigating a complicated mix of policy and weather. Brazil's instant coffee sector is trying to understand why it still faces a steep United States tariff, even after other coffee products received exemptions. That uncertainty is weighing on trade flows in a segment where the United States has historically been a key buyer. At the same time, Brazilian growers are watching the weather closely. Arabica producers are cautiously optimistic about yields, while some Robusta and Conilon growers expect a downturn due to the natural biennial cycle of the plants. Together, policy and agronomy are shaping a very uneven outlook for different parts of the coffee complex. Before we wrap up, a quick stop in dry bulk. BHP has begun diverting some iron ore cargoes that were effectively blocked from sale in China to alternative buyers in places like Malaysia and Vietnam. This follows a contract dispute that has left large volumes of a specific BHP product building up at Chinese ports. While the tonnages involved are small relative to global iron ore trade, the move shows how even the largest miners are having to become more flexible, finding new customers when their biggest market becomes more complicated. So when you step back, you see a world where safe haven demand is lifting gold to historic highs. Energy systems are being stress tested by weather and infrastructure limits. Sanctions are redrawing oil product flows, and farmers and miners alike are adjusting to shifting trade winds. These are not isolated stories. They are all reflections of a global commodity system that is being reshaped by geopolitics, climate variability, and changing patterns of demand. That's it for today's episode. If you found this episode valuable, be sure to subscribe, share, and leave a review.